Have you ever doubted reincarnation? I did, until something happened in my village that changed everything. What started as a strange bond between a grandmother and her grandson turned into a story none of us can explain. Watch till the end. And maybe, like me, you start believing in things beyond your control. In the sleepy town of Nemo, nestled between red-dotted roads and whispering palm trees, a pair of twins was born under a moon that hung like an omen. The midwife, Mama Ebube, swore that as she cradled them in her trembling hands, one let out a cry while the other only smiled. That smile, gentle yet eerie, made the villagers exchange uneasy glances. Some whispered Ogbanj, those mystical children who come and go, teasing life and death like a game of hide and seek, but Kamsi and Kochi were not ordinary twins. They were bound not just by blood, but by a bond so deep it almost made them a single soul in two vessels. From infancy, they could predict each other's emotions. When Kochi was scratched by a branch while playing in the bush, Kamsi felt the sting before she even saw the blood. They spoke in riddles only they understood, and gave each other special names. Kamsi called Kochi Namo, and Kochi called her Enenine. These names were sacred, no one else dared use them, not even their parents. Their mother, Adis, a strong woman who had birthed 8 children before the twins, watched them with both pride and fear. She believed they were a gift, and perhaps, a warning. Their father, Obina, was more practical. Children are children, he would grumble. As long as they are healthy and bring no trouble, let the spirits call them what they want. The twins were inseparable. They shared the same desk in class, same plate during mealtime, and even the same mat during afternoon naps. If Kamsi was sick, Kochi stayed home too. If Kochi wept at night, Kamsi's eyes would be swollen with tears by dawn, though she had no idea why. It was on their 12th birthday that the air shifted. That morning, a strange mist had settled in the compound, clinging to the walls like breath. The palm trees seemed to bow solemnly, and the chickens refused to cluck. Kamsi woke up screaming. Kochi was burning with fever, his body trembling violently. They rushed him to every herbalist within reach, poured oil on his forehead, chanted over his head with kola nuts, and recited psalms into his ears. But by dusk, Kochi's heart stopped. Kamsi didn't cry, she simply sat beside his small, lifeless body, her eyes wide, lips trembling as though trying to call out Namo but too stunned to speak. That night, she whispered the name into the air 100 times, hoping it would echo back. It never did. Kamsi changed. Her once sparkling eyes now carried a depth that was unnatural for a girl of 12. She stopped playing, stopped laughing. She became a shadow walking through the world, her spirit half living. The villagers left her alone, as though her sadness might spread. They feared her quiet. They feared her bond with the dead. No one understood the silence that stretched between her soul and the memory of her twin brother. Except Kamsi. Deep inside, she believed he had never left, he was just waiting. Years passed, and time did what time always tries to do, it healed wounds on the surface while quietly preserving the deeper scars beneath. Kamsi grew up, married a kind man named Ikena, and bore 3 children. On the outside, she lived a full life, cooking, laughing, raising her children, hosting family gatherings. But inside, she carried a hollow weight, a silent ache that never softened. The world saw a smiling mother, a good wife, and eventually a graceful grandmother. No one saw the girl who still whispered Namo into her pillow on cold nights. By the time Kamsi turned 68, her first daughter, Amoka, had gotten married and given birth to a baby boy. His name was Jidena, hold on to the father, a name chosen to honor Ikena's late father. When Amoka gave birth, Kamsi moved into her daughter's home in Oka for Omogwo, a traditional child visit that allowed the grandmother to help care for the new mother and baby. It was meant to be temporary, but no one predicted the depth of the connection that would form between the aged grandmother and the infant boy. From the moment Kamsi first held Jidena, something stirred within her. His eyes, too knowing for a newborn, searched her face with quiet curiosity. He rarely cried when she was around. Instead, he would fix his eyes on her, studying her every movement with an intensity that unnerved even Amoka. "Mama," Amoka would joke, "you've charmed my son, oh. You've turned him into your own husband." Kamsi would smile, but something about the way Jidenna looked at her unsettled her. By the time Jidenna turned 4, the boy had become unusually attached to his grandmother. He would sit in her lap for hours, listening quietly as she told stories about her childhood in Nemo. Sometimes, he would interrupt, asking questions far beyond his age. "Was your favorite tree the big one near the stream? Or didn't you hide from Mama Ebube behind the yam barn?" Kamsi never mentioned those details aloud. One warm afternoon, as Kamsi entered the sitting room with a bowl of mangoes for Jidenna, she found him in his playpen surrounded by toys. He looked up, his little face glowing with excitement. And then he said it, "Enenine." Kamsi froze, the bowl of mangoes slipped from her hands, crashing to the floor and scattering fruit across the tiles. Time seemed to pause. The boy's face, still beaming, tilted in confusion. "Enenine," he repeated, stretching his arms toward her. Her heart raced like a drum. Her breath caught. Her vision blurred. No one else had ever called her that name, not her husband, not her children, not even her closest friend. It was Kochi's name for her. Only Kochi's. She hadn't heard it spoken aloud in over 50 years. "Jidenna," she managed to say, kneeling before him. "Who told you that name?" The boy simply smiled and wrapped his arms around her neck. "I missed you," he whispered. For the rest of that day, Kamsi said nothing. She didn't tell Amoka, didn't even mention the incident during their evening meal. That night, she stayed awake, her heart heavy with questions and her soul trembling with something between fear and joy. Was it possible? Was Kochi back? But that was just the beginning, because in the weeks that followed, Jidenna began to exhibit signs that made denial impossible. He started humming Kochi's favorite tune while stacking his toy blocks. He began drawing chalk spirals on the walls, symbols their father had once taught them as children. And he called her Enenine again, always when they were alone. Kamsi couldn't pretend anymore. Her brother, the soul she had lost in the cruel hands of fever, had returned. But not as a ghost, as her grandson. The days that followed became a slow unraveling of everything Kamsi thought she knew about life, death, and the space in between. Though she wore her usual composed expression, smiling when Jidenna's parents returned from work. Cooking her famous bitter leaf soup with quiet precision, inside, she was spiraling. Every day, she watched her grandson with an aching mix of wonder and dread, trying to convince herself that maybe it was all coincidence. But the signs multiplied, persistent and unexplainable. Jidenna, now 4.5, preferred sitting alone in the back compound, his eyes scanning the sky or the trees as though expecting something or someone. He didn't play with the neighborhood children. Instead, he would build tiny huts out of sand and mutter old Igbo proverbs Kamsi hadn't heard in decades. One afternoon, Kamsi saw him carving a shape on the earth with a stick. When she looked closely, her breath caught in her throat. It was a perfect drawing of the sacred twin symbol they had etched together into the base of the aqua tree in their compound back in Nimo, 2 spirals facing each other, touching at the center. That night, she couldn't sleep. Memories came flooding back, her brother's mischievous laughter. His stubborn pride, how he always said he'd never leave her alone in this world, not even in death. Back then, she had thought it was just something a child says. Now, those words carried new weight. It was time to tell someone. One evening, after putting Jidenna to sleep, Kamsi called Amoka to the veranda. The evening breeze whispered through the neem trees, and a lone owl hooted in the distance. Amoka, balancing a cup of pap in one hand, looked at her mother curiously. "Mama, you've been distant. Is something wrong? Is it Jidenna?" Kamsi hesitated. Then, slowly, with a trembling voice, she began to speak. "I had a twin brother, Kochi," she said. We were one soul, really. People used to call us Outbanj because of how inseparable we were. He died when we were 12. Amoka's eyes widened. You never told me this. I couldn't, Kamsi said. Some things hurt so much you bury them until they feel like myths. But now. Jidena. What about him? He calls me Enenine. No one has ever called me that since Kochi died. No one even knew that name. And it's not just the name. He knows things about my childhood, about me and Kochi. Things no one ever told him. Things even I had forgotten until he said them. Amoka was silent for a long time. Then she lowered her pap and whispered, Mama, during my pregnancy with Jidena, strange things happened. I used to dream of a boy who would hold my belly and whisper in a voice I couldn't place. And when Jidena was born, he refused to breastfeed. He would just stare at me with those wide, solemn eyes. The doctor said he was just different, but, she paused. His teachers say he talks about things no child his age should know. Sometimes he says he lived before. He told me once that I used to carry him on my back as a girl. Mama, I was scared. The two women sat in silence as the wind wrapped around them like a ghostly cloak. Somewhere inside the house, Jidena stirred in his sleep, murmuring something unintelligible. I think, Amoka whispered, we need to find answers. Kamsi nodded. Yes. We must know the truth. Before it consumes us. The next morning, they began their search, visiting churches, speaking with pastors, and consulting prophets. Some waved it off as imagination. Others, their eyes wide, asked questions they couldn't answer. But when they visited a revered diviner in New Mons, the truth they'd feared was finally spoken out loud. What you carry in your home, the old man said, his voice dry like rustling leaves, is not your grandson alone. He is your brother, returned. The soul that could not leave you behind. The diviner's compound in New Mons was quiet, but the silence was heavy. As Kamsi and Amoka left the shrine, Jidena held tightly to his grandmother's wrapper, his small fingers curling into the faded fabric as if he sensed the weight of what had just been revealed. The wind rustled through the raffia roof, and the air smelled faintly of smoked herbs and earth. Neither woman spoke as they made their way back to the car. There was nothing left to say, he was Kochi. That was the conclusion they had both feared and yearned for. The soul that had once called her Enenine as a boy, who had promised never to leave her, had returned, reincarnated in her daughter's son. That night, Kamsi sat with Jidena under the moonlight, the air cool and still. He played with her fingers, quietly humming a tune only she remembered from their childhood. A song Kochi used to sing when they went to fetch water in the stream. Her eyes brimmed with tears, not of fear, but of a profound, aching wonder. Namo, she said softly. He looked up and smiled. I thought you forgot. The words struck her like a clap of thunder. I never forgot. Never. The next few months felt like living between worlds, between the past and the present. Between joy and confusion. Kamsi began to open up to Jidena, telling him stories from their childhood in Nemo, what they did, how they got into trouble, the secret places they hid from Mama Ebiub. Each time, the boy would nod knowingly, sometimes even finishing her sentences. Remember the old mango tree with the hole? He said one day, interrupting her. Where we hid the white stone. She froze. No one knew about that. I did, he said with a shrug. We found it after the rainstorm, and I said it looked like a chicken's egg. She stared at him, trembling. That memory had been buried so deep, she almost believed she'd imagined it herself. But here it was, alive again in the voice of a 4-year-old boy. Amoka watched this strange bond with unease. Though she loved her son deeply, something about the way he related to her mother unnerved her. It was as though she was a visitor in her own home, an outsider looking in. Sometimes she would find the two of them speaking in hushed tones, laughing like old friends who shared lifetimes of secrets. And Jidenna began to change. His drawings grew more intricate, filled with symbols that Amoka didn't understand. He spoke less with children his age and more like an elder in a child's body. Even the neighbors began to talk. "That boy," one old woman whispered, "his spirit is ancient." The climax came one morning when Jidenna stood in front of a cracked mirror and began to sob uncontrollably. Kamsi rushed in, thinking he'd hurt himself, but found him staring at his own reflection, muttering, "This isn't my face. This isn't me. Where did I go?" She held him tightly as he cried into her chest, whispering Enenine over and over again like a sacred chant. It was the first time she truly realized how torn he was, his soul caught between two lifetimes. Trying to make sense of a body that didn't feel like his, it wasn't just her brother returning. It was her brother trapped. The line between past and present was no longer blurred, it had collapsed completely, and something inside her told her. The journey was far from over. The weeks that followed were like walking through fog for Kamsi. Each moment with Jidenna revealed more fragments of her brother, each glance, each gesture peeling back the years as though time itself had folded. And yet, she saw him, Jidenna, her grandson, struggling under the weight of a soul too vast for his small frame. It wasn't just a reincarnation anymore. It was a haunting. He would sometimes wake up at night screaming, not from nightmares, but from vivid memories. "They are taking Enenine away." He'd cry, eyes wide, drenched in sweat. Kamsi would hold him close, rocking him, whispering lullabies she once sang to Kochi. They were songs Jidenna had never been taught, yet would hum unconsciously in his sleep. Amoka began to keep a notebook, documenting each oddity, dreams too detailed, conversations too mature, memories that predated his birth. The lines blurred further when Jidenna began refusing to answer to his name. "I'm not Jidenna," he told his mother one morning, staring into his bowl of yam porridge. "I told you already. I'm Kochi." Amoka slapped the table. "Stop it. You're my son, not whatever this is." The boy only stared at her, eyes filled with a wisdom that made her shiver. "But you're not the one I came back for." Kamsi intervened gently, placing a wrinkled hand over Amoka's. "Let him be. This isn't disobedience. It's a soul searching for rest." Amoka's eyes glistened with unshed tears. "But Mama, what if we broke something bringing him back? What if he was never meant to return?" Kamsi didn't answer. She had begun asking herself the same question. There was a heaviness growing in Jidenna. A kind of spiritual fatigue. Sometimes he'd sit in the garden, watching the trees as if expecting them to whisper answers. "I want to go home," he said one afternoon. "We're home," she replied. "No," he said, pointing toward the west. "I mean before. Where we used to hide from Papa when he beat the drum after school. Where you cried the day I stole your mango." The ache in her chest returned. Kochi had done exactly that when they were 8. He had stolen her only mango and pretended the goat ate it. She hadn't told anyone. But he had laughed so hard. He confessed that night in their sleep mat, Jidenna began losing weight. Not from sickness, but from something deeper, more spiritual. He started asking difficult questions. Why did I have to come back? Why did I have to leave then? Do I have to live this life again? What if I just want to rest? Kamsi sought help again. This time, they visited a renowned seer in Enugu. After a long consultation, the woman, blind in one eye and draped in coral beads, offered a chilling answer: "The boy carries a twin soul burden. His return was born from longing, not calling. His bond with you was stronger than death itself. But that bond is now his chain. What can we do?" Kamsi asked desperately. The seer looked at her with pity. "Prepare him. Prepare yourself. He cannot carry this twice. If he lives again, it will be forever." The words sank like stones in their hearts. That night, Kamsi held Jidenna close, brushing his soft hair, tears falling onto his forehead. He looked up and whispered, "Enenine, if I go, will you be okay?" "No," she choked. "But I'll let you go. If you must." He nodded, as if understanding something much older than the room they sat in. It was then she realized she had to let go, not of her grandson, but of the part of her that had kept Kochi anchored to the world. The love that once saved them now risked destroying them both. They were two souls in one story, bound by love. Pulled by time, but every story must find its ending. The Hammertown winds arrived early that year. The skies above Oka turned pale and dust-laden, casting everything in a faded hue, as if even nature knew something sacred was coming to an end. Kamsi sat by the window most mornings, her brittle hands folded in her lap, her eyes always searching the horizon. Jidenna had grown quieter. He no longer asked questions. He no longer drew in the sand or hummed forgotten tunes. He simply sat by her side, as though waiting for something only he could sense. His laughter, once bright and childlike, had dulled into a gentle silence. At 6 years old, he now walked like an old man in a child's body, measured, cautious, reflective. His mother watched helplessly, her heart torn between love and fear. But Kamsi knew. The time had come. One evening, as the sun bled red into the sky, Kamsi took Jidenna back to Nemo. It had been decades since she walked the earth of her childhood. The old family house was now crumbling, its mud walls cracked and overtaken by vines. But the mango tree still stood, the one with the hollow base where Kochi had once hidden the smooth white stone. She took him there, holding his hand tightly. He didn't ask why. He didn't speak. He only touched the trunk gently, as if greeting an old friend. "This is where we last played," Kamsi whispered. "Before you fell ill. Before you left me." Jidenna looked up at her, and for a moment, Kamsi didn't see her grandson. She saw her twin brother, same eyes, same gentle smile, same spirit shining through. "I came back because you weren't ready to say goodbye," he said softly. Tears ran down her wrinkled cheeks. "I'm still not ready." He stepped forward, placed his small forehead against hers, and whispered, "But I am." That night, they slept in the old house, on mats laid out under a patchy zinc roof. In the stillness, Kamsi had a dream. She was 12 again, laughing with Kochi as they raced barefoot through the yam field. He handed her a mango and said, "This time, I won't steal it." She woke up weeping, but her heart was light. She looked beside her. Jidenna was asleep, his face peaceful, almost glowing. She leaned over and kissed his forehead. "You are free, Namo." They returned to Oka 2 days later. And as if the soul had been released, Jidenna began to change. He laughed again. He played with other children. He even began calling Kamsi Mama like he used to, only occasionally slipping back into Enenine in moments of deep affection. It was as if the twin soul had decided to rest, allowing the boy to become himself. But time, ever watchful, never forgets a bond like theirs. Years passed. Jidenna grew into a striking young man, wise beyond his years, deeply intuitive, and gifted in strange, wonderful ways. People came from all over to seek his counsel. "He speaks like he's lived before," many said. Kamsi, now in her 90s, would only smile quietly. She knew the truth, though she rarely spoke of it. Then, one morning, her body gave in. She was 95, her final words, spoken only to Jidenna, were, "Namo. Thank you for coming back." A week after the funeral, Jidenna didn't wake up. His mother found him lying peacefully in bed, a soft smile on his lips. There was no sign of distress, no illness. Just peace, but folded in his palm was a note in his handwriting, addressed to his mother. "I couldn't let her be lonely again. I've done what I came for. Let me rest now." He had returned to her in life, and now, followed her into the great beyond. The village mourned. Some called it tragedy. Others, fate. But Kamsi and Kochi, Enenine and Namo, were together again. where no time, no sickness, no death could pull them apart, and so the story ended where it began, with two souls, forever one, in the quiet town of Nemo. Long after the funerals had been held and the wails of mourning had faded into the harmattan winds, the story of Kamsi and Kochi, reborn as Jidena, lived on like a sacred legend. Those who heard it spoke in hushed tones, not out of fear, but reverence. It was not just a tale of reincarnation, it was a story of love so powerful, it pulled a soul back from the afterlife. A story that turned death into a doorway rather than an ending. After Jidena's passing, Amoka was never the same. She moved back to Nemo with her husband and other children, bringing with her the belongings of her son, his journals, his worn notebooks filled with symbols and visions, his audio recorder full of reflections that felt far older than his 30 years. She set up a small reading room in the back of the family compound, where people could come to listen to Jidena's voice, read his writings, and meditate beneath the old mango tree where Kamsi and Kochi had once played. Strangely, it brought peace. People who visited said the place had a healing energy. Some said they felt as though someone was walking beside them as they read the journals. Others claimed to hear faint laughter near the mango tree when the breeze swept through the compound. Children began calling the place Obi Enenine, the heart of Enenine. One day, an elderly woman arrived from Nsaka. Her eyes were tired but knowing. She claimed she had seen Jidena in a dream, dressed in white, standing beside a young girl under a glowing tree. He told me, she whispered, that he had lived two lives but loved only one person fully, his twin soul. Amoka welcomed her like family. She began to understand that her son's journey was never hers to control. He had come back to fulfill a promise. A soul contract written in a time the world had forgotten. And when that was done, he left, not as a child taken too soon, but as a spirit who had finally found peace. Kamsi's grave rested beside the mango tree now, just a few feet from where she had first called her brother Namo. Jidena's grave, placed beside hers, bore a simple inscription: one soul, two lives. Now at rest. And though the earth now held their bodies, their bonds seemed to echo louder than ever before. People said that at dusk, if you sat quietly beneath the tree, you might hear faint voices, two children, laughing, calling each other by names no one else dared use. In time, the story spread far beyond Nemo. Writers documented it, churches debated it, and spiritual seekers studied it. But no one could quite explain it. Science had no words for it. Theology offered only speculation. But the villagers knew this was not just the tale of twins. It was a testament that love, in its purest and most stubborn form, defies logic. It transcends lifetimes. And sometimes, just sometimes, it reincarnates. Even today, mothers whisper the story of Kamsi and Kochi to their children during full moons. Lovers light candles beneath the mango tree to pray for love that outlasts the body. And when harmattan returns and the wind blows strong through Nemo, elders say it's the twins playing again, two shadows chasing each other beyond time. They were never meant to be apart, and now, finally, they never would be.